I mean, in the hospital, and he had tubes going through. Go ahead.
So, Dad takes us to go see Rudy at the French hospital. He says, Rudy's having his open heart operation. It's a big deal. There's a good chance he's not going to make it, so we're going to go visit him. I says, fine. We go there, and Rudy says, you want to see my... And I said, no, you know, he had it was all bandaged up. Rudy lived another, 25 years or something. Our dad dies, and Rudy keeps on stroking it.
I want to say one thing, or excuse me, about Rudy. He loved his grandma Zolly Eichenbaum.
Everyone did.
Yeah, he was probably the closest to his mother of anyone. In fact, he's the one who had the picture painted of Grandma Eichenbaum that I have.
Go ahead, no, tell them.
Well,
What does Zolly mean? Was that her full
Sally
name?
is Sally.
It's Sally in English.
Z-O-L-I.
Cioli.
Z-O-I.
well,
All right, go ahead, Uncle Mel.
I want to go back to when Rudy was in the hospital because I was there, and he had tubes. He's being fed through his arms, and he had tubes throughout his body. And here's a guy who had a fantastic life, and he was on it. He looked like his deathbed, and he was in his 70s, I believe. And he said, you know, if I knew I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. It was amazing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do.
So,
Yeah.
I do have one more story I'm going to try to clean up for you guys. But there was a guy named, who was the guy who shot the guy who shot President Kennedy?
Jack
Oh.
Ruby?
Jack Ruby.
All right, no, Oswald shot Kennedy.
No,
Jack
it wasn't
Ruby
Jack
shot-
Ruby.
Stop. Jack Ruby worked that area of San Francisco, and when all that came down, they came down to see to see Uncle Rudy, to talk to him about Ruby, whom he claimed he never knew the guy, he never worked for him, etc. But the information that I have indicates that he might have worked for him as a bartender. But that's as close as that comes.
Jack Ruby.
Jack Ruby
Shot the other
Oswald.
guy.
That's right.
He shot the guy that
We
shot
understand
John
That's what we
Kennedy.
said that.
Okay.
So he is kind of a wild kind of guy. So he used to have a Korean woman sitting by his bed for his personal needs, and he would pay them a substantial amount of money. And to my understanding, they would sell him to each other. In other words, you can go down there and work for Rudy for this amount of money, because he paid pretty good. So Ralphie, his eldest son, calls me, and he says, Paulie, he says, you got to help me here with Grandpa. I used to call him Grandpa because he had grandkids with him. He says, Grandpa is spending a lot of money on these, what he called wobos, which means wife in Korean. And I says, you know, Ralphie, my attitude is he made the money, he spends his money. See, he made it, he spends it. I mean, that's up to him. He says, yeah, I agree with you, I understand. He says, but I understand he gave away the lease to the Zanzibar, which was a bar on Ocean Avenue, and worth $100,000.
Ocean Avenue in San Francisco?
Yeah, Ocean Avenue, San Francisco. It was worth $100,000. And that he gave away this rug, and that's worth $45,000. I says, I'll come up and see him. So I come up and I see him. He says, Paulie, how are you? And I says, hey, I'm great, Uncle. I says, can I talk to you a couple of minutes? He says, certainly. I says, you know, I believe that you earn the money, you spend your money, the way you want. He says, well, thank you very much. I says, you're welcome. I says, but on the B side, as I understand that you're paying a lot of money for the services that you're getting. We're talking some serious money here. We're talking the lease on the Zanzibar. We're talking that giant rug you have, handmade rug. He says, you see this face? I got a mirror. I'm not a young man of 45 anymore. He says, oh, heck, I'm 70-something, whatever he was. He says, I don't care why they love me, I just want them to love me. I says, I appreciate that, but this is big bucks. He says, yeah, I know, not using this word, but yeah, the frickin' you get ain't worth the frickin' you get. And I said, okay, I mean, that's it. So I told Ralphie, I said, Ralphie, this ain't nothing gonna change.
A funny thing about Ralphie, he eventually became a minister.
Yeah, he was already a Baptist minister. That's it. That's.
Are his two sons now gone?
Huh?
The two sons are now gone, aren't they?
Not Denny. His sons are gone. The grandkids.
Yeah.
Well,
Who is
let's finish off with that generation. So who came after Rudy?
Adolf.
And tell me about Adolf.
Adolf was the kind of guy. He'd never be straight. He'd never be straight with you. And if you ask him a tough question, you say, Uncle Rudy, what happened with this? He said, oh, listen, I'll be back in a second. I got to take a leak. and it happened every time. So he used to buy and sell watches, and he'd undo his sleeve and he'd say, "Take a look at these," and he'd buy stuff and sell it. He hung around with his brother Gene all the time. They were real tight, but he was tight. You never see money leaving him much. One event that we had, he introduced me to one of the guys that he dealt with at a bank, and I watched the guy write down my name and say, introduced by Adolf Eichenbaum, and it told me a lot. Just that happening, that the power of Adolf existed because it was important enough to write down who he was introducing. So his wife used to yell and scream at him.
Oh, that was Aunt Mildred.
Aunt Mildred, he'd turn off his, so he wouldn't hear this, and she'd scream at him and say, "You no good son of a bitch, you bastard." And I mean, as he'd go on like that, he'd be sitting there smiling, and we'd be like chagrined, But she was nicer to me than he was. It was interesting. Rudy said about her, there's nothing wrong with her, she just hates Eichenbaums. So Adolf and I used to go to the college, and at 8 o'clock, class was over by 9, I'd come down, I'd pick up Adolf, I'd go downtown, we'd meet Gene, and we'd go to Compton's cafeteria, which was the worst food invented by man. It was terrible. And I'd ask questions. I'd say, well, tell me Depression era real estate. Tell me about that. And they'd tell me stories. I could tell you those stories later, but they'd tell me stories. One day, Jeannie says to me, he says, "You're getting a lot out of this, aren't you?" I says, "I am. I'm getting more out of this than I get out of college." He says, "Good. From now on, you're buying breakfast."
You're what?
You're buying breakfast. I didn't have the money. I couldn't afford to buy those guys breakfast. I just didn't have that kind of money. And so, as a result, that was the last time we ever met. Yeah.
Oh, I want to say something about Adolf, though.
Yeah.
It's just simple that he used to play the violin. And I think Mel used to play the violin, too.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. You said there were 4 kids?
No, yeah, she got one.
There's 5?
No, after Adolf was Mom, Shirley, and then Jeannie.
No. Yeah, Mom.
There was 5.
Yeah, there's 5.
5.
Yeah.
So, Adolf,
By the way, he did have children. You're aware of that?
anyway.
But we know what's really interesting in our family, especially the Eichenbaum family. There's more boys than girls, and even in some of the Laub family, it's that way. There's more boys than girls.
I think it's like that in all of the families.
So moving on from,
Well, because Mel has 3 boys and 1 girl. Arnie has 2 boys and a girl. My dad only has 2 boys. I don't know about you had 2
My
and
mom
2.
had 3 boys and 1 girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Mike has 2 boys and a girl. Joe has 3 boys and a girl.
you want to go on with Jeannie?
Yeah, please.
Okay,
What happened to Adolf's children? You want to talk about that?
Jeannie.
Oh, I know.
What?
What do you want to know about
we can
Adolf's
just do
children?
really briefly. You can say it, but let's
Just
try
get
and
it
finish.
in.
Okay, I'll just tell you briefly about Adolph's children. Midge, Arden Midge, was born on June 11th, and she was married to Bill Retton, and he was an engineer, and they had 3 sons.
Okay.
And then they also had Adolph and Mildred had Susie, and I don't remember what kind of work she did. Oh, well, I know she ran a restaurant in the last one thing she did in Sonoma.
Yeah, she had a vacation rental. Also, bed and
vacation
breakfast,
rental.
remember?
And now she does Meals on Wheels with her partner. She has a partner, Susan Holman.
And you know, Mitch's husband passed away,
Yes, of course.
and she lives in Oregon.
What?
She lives in Oregon.
All right. Let's go on to Jean and then to
Key
Shirley.
thing about Jean is Jean was as straight as Adolf tried to be wily. If you asked Jean the correct question, he would give you the answer. So don't ask him a question you didn't want to hear the answer.
And Jean was the youngest.
And Jean was the
Yeah,
youngest.
he was younger than my mother.
He got drafted in World War II, and when World War II was over, he had been buddies with his sergeant, and the sergeant came to work with him. And he kept on buying hotels, and at one point, he and my father were partners in the second largest building in San Jose, and I don't think it did that great because they sold it.
They also owned a building in San Francisco
Sixth
on
and Market.
Market Street.
6th and Market, and it had Van Heusen was there, one of their tenants, and he expressed to me the problems of getting the rent from the tenants, and you'd have to go back, and they'd have to go back, and that really ticked him off. But Jean owned Hotel Richelieu and numerous properties in San Jose, and he died in Chicago.
Oh, he did?
Yep.
In the arms of his lover.
He was married.
In the arms of his
Oh.
lover.
Yeah, but he was married
Like, did he
to
have a heart
Audrey.
attack, or did her husband come back?
No, she wasn't married. He was married. His wife had postpartum depression.
Audrey.
Yeah.
I only know of one wife.
We had 2 wives. You remember this second one was the one who used to work at the movie theater to put up.
What was her name?
I'll have to think about it.
Okay.
It's too many
And
years.
Yeah.
you knew about his 2
Yeah.
sons.
Jean had Douglas and Richard.
Right.
And Douglas is the one who's who's written down a lot about our family history.
His wife.
Sue.
Sue.
Sue. He married a genius. I mean, he really did.
Douglas, his wife.
Yeah, she is really bright, and she has a whole book on this stuff, and she did a gorgeous job.
Genealogy
Gorgeous
about
job.
our family.
And yeah,
So, can you tell me any more about Adolf and Jean, or should we move on to Shirley?
No, I think
the key thing with them is that they were so tight. Their whole life, they were like meeting every breakfast.
If-
Yeah.
But the genius, the wealthiest, the most successful guy was not Rudy. It was Gene. And you know that Gene would borrow money wherever he could, and he'd pay any interest he could to buy whatever there was to be bought in San Francisco. I said, how can you do that? He says, because I can make it happen. And he knew that there was control during the Second World War on the tenants' rentals, and they took off the requirements, so he could raise the rent and make a lot of money, plus the fact that any time there was any space in any of his motels, he'd put in a bar.
Yeah.
And he was phenomenal.
Wait, so like if there was an empty hotel room, he turned it into a bar?
Not a
No,
hotel
no.
room, it would be downstairs on the street, an empty store. He would have bars, and he bought anything and everything. He was a wild man, but it was the right guy at the right time. And he took a lot of guts and enlightenment to take the chances he did. And he told me one time he had a building in Oakland. He says, if I gave you the building, it didn't cost you a dime, you couldn't afford it. I said, why? He says, because you'd have to pay the property tax, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to pay the insurance, you have to rent the place. He says, but I can make it happen. Which meant you really had to have finesse, and you had to have an entrepreneurial ability to make things happen. And he was enlightening. And of course, when he passed away, he had a huge apartment house complex right in San Jose. And the two sons wound up with this huge apartment house, which was over a block long. And Doug was smart enough eventually to get out of it and sell it to his brother. And his brother could hardly afford to pay his brother off because it was really soft. They didn't know how to.
He came in at the wrong time. When Doug sold it to Rich, it was at the top of the market. Then the market went down, and people could tell him, I can't afford $1,000 for this. I can get the same size down the street for $500. You want to give it to me for $500? I'll take it. But if not, I'm going down the street. And that's what happened with him. Then he sold it. And then the market took off. And I mean, it's phenomenally down there. And so he missed that. But he sold his house. And he got, for what he sold his house for, was enough to buy a place twice that size in a better location down in Gilroy. So he did fine. He did good.
Okay, I just want to tell one little
Yeah, go.
snippet. Years ago, Uncle Jeannie was in the Second World War, and I wrote a letter to him. He was in the service, and I told him how proud